So today we are focusing on one area of the program and one area only, and that is your negotiate tab. When I click negotiate, these are all of the tools. I'm going to try to get through as many tools as possible. My goal is not to overwhelm you. My goal is to show you the power of the software, the power of using these tools to balance out, what should happen, what could happen, manage expectations for your client, make sure they have enough money, because your clients, a lot of times, especially alimony recipients, they're just scared it's not going to be enough. Or when you're representing a payor, they're just saying it's too much, or whatever it is. And so we're trying to back that up with numbers, and some facts for your client. And then also, especially family law software, this whole area of the program really shines when you have those cases where the parties have money and they have stuff, but they don't necessarily have so much money and stuff that you refer it out to a CPA or you refer it out to a financial person. So that's where this program is really going to shine. That's going to be the sweet spot, is those cases where you're keeping them in-house, and you're doing the financials versus sending them out. Okay. And so what are some of the assumptions before we start this? So number one, my assumption is that you guys already know how to build a financial affidavit. So as we go through this, what I'm going to do is sample. So when you are in family law software, at the very bottom, there's a sample file. That sample file is what we are going to be using today. And I have set it to Florida. And so you'll know that you're using the sample file because Taylor is the mom and Blake is the dad. So right now, if you were to go on family law software, which I don't suggest you do, I think that people should focus on what we're doing together on the screen. But if you want to kind of play around with exactly what we did today, you can, with the exact same numbers, or you can pull up your own file and do it yourself. So again, that was an open, save, and send, and I opened up the sample file. What else do you have to go over? Okay, client info. This is where you are always entering data. You, your paralegal, your legal assistant, someone built a beautiful financial affidavit for you. So they entered all the income, expenses, assets, etc. So that's step one. So if you're not there yet, this might be too advanced. So you can still hang in here, but definitely consider that. So what's the first thing that we usually do under negotiate? So here we go. This is the first income summary that we have in negotiate. And so this is literally that, it is an income summary. Why is this important? So number one, you're like, well, I already have a financial affidavit. So I can look at my financial affidavit and see what their surplus or deficit is, et cetera. It's annoying, it's multiple pages, and it's just not as clear and concise. So what I did here is I just clicked negotiate and I did support impact, but really it's just a summary of their finances. So this is going to get us started. We have Taylor and we have Blake. And so this is their income on a monthly basis. Child support has already been done. Alimony is still kind of that iffy thing. So again, you have to understand the relationship of alimony and child support. We know that they are closely linked. They're absolutely necessary because they obviously affect each other. So right now it's at 0. But a lot of times I get calls from people. So this one's not that bad. But sometimes I get files from people and they're like, what should alimony be? And both of them are in the negative. And I'm like, there's no money. There's no money. So if there's a need on one end, but on the other end, there might be no ability to pay. So, when that happens, so for instance, one of the things that you might notice when you look at this file, and we can change this. So right now we're looking at these numbers monthly, but you can change it to annual. And so we're just going to stick for this right now, but that would be under report options. So let me just click that so we can go on an annual basis. And the reason we're doing this is so that we can get our bearings for the rest of the CLE. So on an annual basis, Blake makes $162,000 a year. That's his income after taxes. And then we have all of his living expenses. So as an attorney or as a person that does looks at financial affidavits a lot or builds them, that might look a little funny to you. And why is that? It's very unlikely that a man that brings in almost $200,000 a year only has living expenses of $22,000 a year. And so with that being said, what does that mean? So A lot of times attorneys, you've already filed financial affidavits for your client, maybe they already swore to it, et cetera, and you might see things afterward and you want to talk to your legal assistant. Are those really the numbers? What do we got to do? So one of the things that I suggest to attorneys, and I don't suggest you overdo this, but sometimes you can duplicate the file and save it as your play file. So all of these numbers took time to get from the client, from opposing counsel, et cetera. These are the numbers that are probably already filed in court on sworn affidavits. And so you might not necessarily, your paralegal is going to be pissed if you change all of these numbers and then you can't go back. So a lot of times what I suggest lawyers do is you go to files and settings, open, save, and send, and then you click save as. And so it wouldn't say sample, it would be like the Jones Smith divorce case number, but you would call it your play file or something to that effect. So one file is I'm not going to touch it. This file is the one I'm going to play with. And so then when you click OK, see, I've already done this before. Let me just put in a couple of numbers. Click save. Now what happens is I go to negotiate, I see support impact, and then I have all of this here. And then I say, fine, my original file is intact, but I'm going to increase or decrease these expenses. So sometimes these are just way too high, or the income, you highly suspect that this person is underemployed and you think that income should be imputed. And once that's imputed, that's when you want to look at these numbers about available dollars to spend on alimony. So that is one thing that you can do. And so for those of you that might have just joined in, basically what I said was I've made a file and I'm going to adjust some of these numbers because I just don't think they're in the right place for whatever purpose. One of the things I suggest you should do in your play file is if that's the case, what I could do is under client info, income and expenses, I'm going to do living expenses, both side by side. Sometimes what I tell attorneys to do is here, other itemized expenses. So one of the things that I could do is I could add a line and then scroll all the way here and do it here. So, and I could call this other expenses and type in like an extra $10,000 or whatever you think it is. So for instance, you might not want to build a full financial affidavit and enter every expense for the opposing party. You're just going to go to their financial affidavit and take that lump number that they claimed as their expenses and pop that in there. And so you could mark that with an XXX, delete later, whatever you want to mark this as so that you know that that's something that you added that was not. So that's like saying like, hey, dude, I'm not going to accept certain expenses or whatever you want to do. That's what I mean. So it's going to open up or decrease available income. And you can do the same thing with income. So again, if I'm calling foul, so again, what we were doing was support impact. And so Taylor is, a lower wage earner. Blake is obviously a higher wage earner. And so what I did was I dramatically increased his living expenses. But in the opposite regard, I could dramatically decrease his living expenses, all for the purpose of creating available net income, because obviously right now there's a huge need and then there's no ability to pay on an annualized basis. So if you're going to go that route where you're imputing or wanting to adjust expenses, I find that super handy is to just add them, but make sure that your note is clear as to what you did. And then again, we're not messing with the beautiful file that your paralegal already did. And so for me, I'm just going to go back and restore the sample file as is, because again, I'm using the sample file because I want you guys to be able to go back and recreate this. The other thing that this is good for, you might have, okay, I'm going to go to the child support calculator. Alimony on the current here. Well, so let's just move to the next tool. Everywhere you go, you're going to see expanded reports. And so these are really important because when you click expanded reports, we're going to take all of this information to another level. And so we're going to click on expanded reports multiple times, but every time you click expanded report, this is what you're going to see. So in this case, I had still kept it on a monthly basis. You could have switched it to annual, but this one's going to be on a monthly basis. And what's important about these full reports is you get all the percentages here. And so that will show you kind of like a reasonableness test. All right, so we're moving on. All right, so again, for those of you that don't know, the next tool under negotiate is what if for child support. So here, I'm not going to spend a super amount of time here, but when you come to this screen, this is what you originally will see in your cases. If you've never used this tool before, you'll have one column and this matches your financial affidavit and child support guideline. When I click add scenario, I'm going to do it twice. Everything's identical. And what I could do is I could increase alimony on a side-by-side basis. Oh, I wanted to do a higher number here. And just see the relationship of child support versus alimony instantly. Or again, what are your parties arguing over? Probably overnights is going to be a big one. So I have 2 children. I could change the overnights and then see this at the top. And then again, I don't mean to make you dizzy. Income, everything that affects it is up here. Okay. So your actual column, you don't necessarily want to change the numbers. And so that is that. Admitting one more. Okay, perfect. So that was the second tool. Let me see. What if? Now, again, the expanded reports are huge. Why? It shows that it is possible to pay the support, or it shows it is not possible to pay the support. This screen is the next one. We call this what if, and we say what if for exemptions, wages, etc. What we mean by that is, what if the husband is paying the mortgage? What if he's also paying the college expenses? What if he's paying alimony and child support? So, or what if your client is receiving less or making more? So these are all of the things that you can ask about. So if your clients are doing a back and forth of child support versus alimony, that's easy. If your clients are asking who should claim the children as exemptions, you can do that too. You can see how filing status affects things, and then who pays the expenses and the mortgages, etc. Why is this important? So again, this is a side-by-side analysis tool that you get to control. You get to say, these are the questions that the parties are having. So I'm going to click copy from actual values. So all of this is identical from what we just saw, but I could make just one change. So here, the wife is claiming both of the kids for the taxes. In this case, I'm going to have the husband claiming both kids for tax purposes. And then we scroll down and we see how this affects their bottom line. And so obviously, when Taylor's claiming the kids, she's got a little bit more money in her pocket. And then when the husband is claiming the kids, in this case, he has a little bit more money in his pocket. So it literally shows you what the value is there. But the other thing that you could do too is, let me just like bring this back here. So Taylor, and then what I'll do is filing status, wages, kid expenses, and mortgage. So sometimes you guys are building an MSA, and so here's like nothing really going on. And then on this side, we'll say that this is where like the husband's getting hit harder. So for instance, I could say we're looking at alimony at 3,000, child support automatically updates. When I scroll down, this is where dad is going to be paying like the extraordinary medical expenses for the kid. This is where the husband is going to be paying. So Taylor's not paying the mortgage, the husband's paying the mortgage. So if you ever have those cases where your client's being unreasonable, or you're in mediation and your client's just paying more and more and more of stuff, they're agreeing, or it's getting imposed on them, or the judge makes a list of, I order you, money spouse to pay all of these things, you go, whoa, 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 judge. And you scroll here and you do this expanded report, and you can show the judge it's just not possible. So in this case, this is where we added way more stuff for Blake, the husband, to pay. And so when I scroll down, what we're going to see here is his net income is just, plummeting based off of all of the things that they're paying. And so sometimes when you come here, you're going to see that the payor is going into the red, meaning they really can't afford it. And so assuming that all the rest is correct, that the income is correct, the expenses are reasonable and accepted, then this is just not possible. So you're telling your client, we're just not going to get there. Or you're assuring your client there's no way that it could be ordered because I have this great report and it's showing that's not going to happen. And in this video, hold on, let me change the text. So let me go back. So the question was about the details. So again, here you can ask about one thing or you can ask about multiple things. And so there was a question about seeing the exemption details again. And so what I did was copy from actual values. And then I gave Blake the child. And there's another exemption screen that we can look at too. But this is just side by side, just talking about who's claiming the kids. And then we would see the expanded report and see how that affects their bottom line. You get a mini report out of it. But at the expanded report, we'll see the full thing, and we'll talk on that tool just a little bit later. But people obviously argue about this one a lot. But again, when you're representing a money spouse, this is a really cool tool because you're going to instantly show this is not possible, or hey, load it up some more. You know, we've got a big earner. So that is the what if tool. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to show. That was about it. And then also for the visual people, we do have graphs throughout the program. I kind of think they're interesting. So for instance, this is the parties before the divorce, and this is the parties after the divorce. I think that's pretty compelling because sometimes you'll see that the non-earning spouse is just like way up here. And again, I call that a reasonableness test as well. So for those visual people, you can say, you know, this is where you were before. Hey client, this is where I got you afterward. Like this is a really pretty graph that shows exactly, you know, how much benefit I gave you through my services and what I ultimately obtained from you. Or in the opposite, these graphs sometimes will show that ain't going to happen. Like this, if for instance, if the pink were all the way above the blue in this case, you would be like, that's called a windfall, and that's not going to happen. Okay, so that was that. So again, what if it's super intimidating when you first come to it, but we're just whatever that one thing is that's bugging your client, that one thing that is sticking up this case, that's what we are talking about. You have that here and you move on. All right. Let me see under more what we have here. Oh, so that's what it is. So we're still in the what if, we're asking questions. And so these are the other tools that we have as well. You know, best filing status, of course, you want to be head of household, best exemption. So this, for the person that was asking about the exemptions, under negotiate, and then you click more and then exemptions, this is basically saying like, hey, Blake should probably claim the kids because overall, if the parties were able to, you know, get it together and like do what's best financially, then this is what they should do financially. But ultimately, as attorneys, you're trying to also limit them coming back to court and fighting over these things. But so that's what that screen is. All right, perfect. And then again, all of these tools are in the cloud. If you're a basic desktop user, you don't have this. So if you're watching this and being like, I don't think I have that, you might not have that. So that was under negotiate, and we kind of went over what if. That means what if XYZ happens. So right, I think we're good. What do I want to do now? I guess we'll just go in order. We're going to go in order, but I'm going to start with the easiest tool as far as alimony goes. So number one, in Florida, alimony is based off of net income. Florida, we are net, net, net. So the whole reason that a program like Family Law Software exists is because getting to net income is like 80% of the battle. So under alimony, click more. Anytime you have a case with alimony, just click more. So just come here and click more. If you do nothing, and I want you to click here. This is called a break-even report. And so every time you come here, there will be something here. And it essentially says, in this case, Taylor, remember, she's making less than $30,000 a year. And we have her expenses. This is a break-even report. It essentially says her alimony must be 653 to get her to zero, to get her in the black. So that means that she's spending way more than she has, and we just need to get her head above water. So this is, when you're looking at alimony, that's your minimum. You know, that's obviously your minimum ask. And then we have a full report, and then we got her to, you know, as close as we could to zero. And so that's what's going on here. So anytime that you are ready to look at alimony, the baby tool, click more and click break even. We also have the Florida alimony bill that got struck down. That was years ago at this point. If anyone's ever been curious to play with it, we still have it. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna do balance income. This tool. So when you come here, it's actually gonna look like this. You're just gonna have like a zero. What does this mean? So this tool is called balance incomes. And so, like we have said before, is that family law software looks at the marriage like a business and they are breaking up. And so when you're married, your income and their income makes this nice big pot of money. And at the end of the day, when you're married, you share that pot of money. That pot of money goes to go through your common expenses. And so what this tool is saying is that if we assume that same premise, the intact premise, and we break them up 50-50, for instance, how much does alimony need to be so that this is an even business split? And so you don't have to do 50-50. You can say the husband's going to keep just a scotch more, or you can say the wife is going to keep a lot more for whatever reason. But why don't we start with the intact relationship that's just right down the middle as far as the that cash, the pot of cash, and I do 50-50. This number already factors in child support. And so what I do is I go into the expanded report that we've seen before. And so assuming the parties split their cash 50-50, this is what alimony would be on a monthly basis. And then our report is annualized, which can be a little confusing. And I get that. So when I scroll down, child support. So this is child support and alimony on an annualized basis. So that number, let me see if I just make this bigger. Okay, I got it. So this number times 12 goes here as alimony, and then child support automatically updates as though that was the alimony situation. 50-50 may or may not be fair. And so how do we know if 50-50 is fair or not? You find out the percentages. So what I do is I scroll down. And remember, this is Blake. He's the payor, and these are his percents. So obviously in Florida, we're not going to pay too much. So what we do is we have gross. We have a bunch of percents, but some of them are based on gross and some of them are based on net. And so you really want to look at this number here. And that's your reasonableness test. It's your will to live test. It's your will to work test. Because obviously, if this number is too high, no judge is going to award that to you. No payor can actually put up more. This is actually pretty reasonable. So that means that the alimony is 21.2% of his available net income. Totally doable. Might be able to pay a little bit more. Might be too high. This percent is extremely important because you got to think about it. So either you might already pay, support to someone, alimony, for instance. And if you're paying 20% of your available net income, that hurts a little bit. 30% is hard. 40% is just not doable. So remember, that's what these percents is what we're talking about. They are a reasonableness test again, and this isn't a bad situation. So maybe I want to push this a little bit more. And I'm like, well, let's see. Let me scroll back up. And I'm going to add another column. And then in this case, I'm going to have Taylor keeping which is 260. When I do that again, so alimony shoots up because that relationship of child support and alimony. So when I scroll down, the same thing is happening. So again, it's really important to just kind of come through here, use the blue bubbles. We have net incomes throughout because we're doing net income after taxes, after expenses, et cetera. But ultimately, so again, here, that's the child support alimony change. So this was a 50-50, this was a 60-40. And then we're going to do our reasonableness test again. And then we obviously we're getting a little out there. So that goes to 35.6. So may or may not be reasonable. And so that's going to be the cash split pot. There are other options and there's graphs again. So again, I feel like the graphs can be pretty compelling. And then you have your graph that shows the before and after. So that was their 50-50 pot. And so we're showing you visually what's going on. There are other options that you can add or remove from this screen. So here are the things that you could possibly change. And so normally, like I said, come to the screen. So the basics again, basic number one, alimony break even. What is that number? Another basic is why don't we consider this relationship a business and let's split it in half. It does. The alimony does include child support by default. So for instance, this number of alimony would equal this amount of child support on an annualized basis. So you can see here, child support was this annualized. When I changed the alimony, we instantly changed the child support. And that's what's so handy about this report, is that we're getting a full picture of the alimony child support balance. And then we're seeing through this report the full impact on the payor and recipient. So great question. Okay, let's move on, because I like this tool. Again, when you come here, you're not going to see this. So what does this tool do? This is called, what does your client want? So your client, you already looked at the income summary and you know that this is an alimony case. And so the question is, how much? And so what this does is we ask for how much money does your client want for a whole year? What do I mean by that? It's very easy for your client to sit down and say, I spend $2,000 a month on rent. I spend $800 on my fancy car. I need to go on vacation. I need to get facials. I need to, do things for the kids, my family, etc. How much money do you want? You can ask your client, how much do you want on a monthly basis? And all you have to do is times that by 12 and put that number here. So let's say that your client says 70. They do the math and they say they need this is a gross number. That $70,000 is a gross number that is super easy for your client to come up with, at least in my opinion. So sit down and tell me your monthly, add a vacation and times it by 12. So what that $70,000 does is it tells me that alimony needs to be almost $2,000. How did we get there? What does that mean? So remember, my client wants $70,000 at the end of the day, and we get it for her. So here, we didn't get there exactly. We got her to $69,000. But what does that mean? It means that if alimony is this dollar amount, it means that child support has to be this amount. And then it means that we get her to that budget and we factor in her own income. So we're saying, if you continue to make this dollar amount and you get alimony and child support, this is how we get you to this budget. And so why this is so powerful is that this is a number that your client intuitively knows. They know how much they need to live on a monthly basis. And so what's really cool about this, though, is that this number could be, where they are right now. They're living in an apartment, they still have their car from when they were married, like whatever this budget is, but we can add another column and do it again. But what we could do is we could up it. So this might be reasonable. And then we say, well, what if you did a 14-day vacation with the kids? What if you lived in a better zip code? What if you lived in the house you want, you drove the car that you wanted, or the standard that you were in? And then we type that number in here and we'll say like 85,000. And so then we're trying to get her here. So again, we do the exact same thing. We're doing it side by side. And we're saying that to get her to 85,000, so remember, we're trying to get Taylor there. She's going to be the recipient. We get her to 84,900. So we don't get her the exact 85,000. So don't go looking for 85,000. And this is what, let me try to see if I can get them all together. This is what alimony would be. And then this is alimony on an annualized basis. And that's child support on an annualized basis based off of this. And so that's what this tool is all about. This is 100% about the recipient's need, their wants. Remember that one column can be, the Corolla column, and this could be like the Lexus column. So however you want to present that to your client. But what's also really cool about it is, again, because you have this giant expanded report, we're doing the reasonableness test every single time. What do I mean by that? When we scroll down, we have all the same percents again here. And we're doing it on a side-by-side basis. So this was totally doable. Probably could have gone up. This is probably a little bit high. And so you can tell your client, you know, alimony is probably somewhere in between here. So like, obviously this might, so when I scroll back up, you're like, this number is probably a little low. This number is probably a little bit high. You can add another column and then like adjust it. So I could have done this one at like 75. And then that could have been to show like side by side, like where it was. And then I can bring back my 80. And then again, let me like, hold on, I got a lot going on my screen. And then you can click PDF. So anytime that you see this, you can click PDF and it's going to generate a report based off of this. And then again, for instance, once you find out that this is like these are the numbers that you want to accept. So for instance, you know that this is like what the alimony should be. So like the 31,000, whatever. When I want to print a child support guideline, et cetera, like we've accepted these numbers, we're going to file, you know, financial affidavit, child support guidelines based off of these numbers. I would go to client info and then I would go into deductions and then like pop in, you know, what was it, like 3183, 3183. And then this number will match from the reports. If you divide it by 12, it'll be the same thing. So you can come and test that. And then when you go to reports, you're ready to print just based off of that information. And that's when you're ready to be done with the case in that situation. So I can make that 0, keep it the same. I mean, it doesn't really matter. So here, that's where we were. Okay. Again, you can change things on here. So play around with the other folders as well. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on them, but there are other details that you can factor in, like all of this. So depending on how, you know, into these financial reports, you might find one that just hurts your eyes. You're like, this hurts my eyes. Give me something that I can chew on, something that I can get a little bit more into. You don't like graphs, etc. So just click around, you know, click for reports, click for things to add. There's so much in here that you can modify. And so that's why I'm showing you all of this, not to overwhelm you, but just poke around and see what works for you. Because again, this is what you're showing your fact finder or your client. Like, you're going to be okay. If you get this money, this is reasonable, this is doable, I can get it for you, and I'm showing you how and why. And there's videos. So I think I forgot to point that out. If I click video, this is going to take me to a quick video, again, that explains something similar to this. There's notes throughout, there's bubbles throughout. So, and then you can always reach out to us as well. Right, that was it. So we went through the what if tools. We went through the alimony tools. So we're going to do ED, and I might get to arrears, maybe. Actually, let's see if there's something more here. No, I don't think we did it. And then there's obviously the present value calculator. Money is worth more today than tomorrow. That's the idea. So go through there. It's just a present value calculation, assuming, you know, if you want to at least show your client, like, you know, you're paying alimony, so why don't I show you what the lump sum would be today versus the monthly payout? So you've got that present value calculator. All right. Equitable distribution. Perfect. So, this, like, again, this is a sample file. So normal, when you come here for the sample file, you're going to see all these numbers that you see. If you open the sample file, you're going to see exactly that. But if you open one of your files that you have not done your ED worksheet for, this is what it's going to look like. A whole bunch of nothings. And so why should you use family law software to do an equitable distribution worksheet? Well, there's lots of reasons why you should. Number one, every time that you did a financial affidavit, you did an ED worksheet. You might not have known it, but you did. So for instance, all of these assets and liabilities, they are currently on my financial affidavit. And so if I add, so just for demonstrative purposes, so this is the real estate section. Let's just add a piece of real estate. So normally under assets and liabilities, these are all of your assets and liabilities. So just for demo purposes, I'm going to add real estate and I'm going to call it the beach condo value. So we just put that in, we valued it at 400,000. Divide property. The beach condo is there. If for whatever reason you come here and this numbers, they just don't look right, you can actually click the more information and figure out what that is. So I can open up the value, appreciation of the home, etc. Look at the mortgage, etc. And so that will help explain how we got that number. So I just clicked here. So I know that a lot of attorneys, you like your own style. You do it in a Word document, you do it in an Excel document, and that's perfectly fine. But what I'm doing is I'm encouraging you to use this. This is kind of like your Excel file. Why would you want to use Excel? I get it, it's easy, but at the same time, when you use Excel and the opposing party is using Excel, you guys are trusting the cells. You're trusting each other's actual formulas and that you guys did it right. Not to say that I wouldn't say it's extremely difficult to use Excel, but again, there's a little bit of trust involved. Here, it's a software program. We're going to get it right. We're going to have everything done. What's going on here? So this, like I said, is the Excel worksheet. So for instance, if I give the main house to the wife and the beach condo to the husband, all I've done is divide real estate, but instantly, once I start dividing property, this updates automatically. And this shows where we were and where we are. If you don't like graphs, get rid of it. But here is also your equalization payment here. It doesn't have to be equal. By default, it's 50-50, but I could type 60. And so it says to give 60% to Taylor, meaning if I want Taylor to walk away with half or 60% of the marital property, I have to increase Taylor's by this much. So that means I got to give Taylor more stuff. Excuse me. So if I do a 50-50, then this is what I have to give Taylor to get there. So this could be considered like your equalization payment at the end after you've done everything, or you use this number to try to get her there. So if there's cash, what I could easily do is, that's not really going to help. It's going to kind of undo it. Oh, we got her. So then I gave her that asset, and then we see how that drops. So again, what you do here is you give stuff to each person. So I could do 50-50, or it could be dollar amounts. So for instance, when it's cash, it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to give a dollar amount versus a percent. And so as you do this, you are creating this report at the bottom. So if I click this report now, this is my ED worksheet. This is my preprint ED worksheet. You might think this looks ugly. I think it looks efficient, but you can get rid of stuff. So here are things that you could add or remove, and there is a tax effect. So here are things that you could add or remove. All of this can be added or removed. So valuation date could be extremely important. Who actually is the title of the asset? What else? I'm just going to keep that for now. I'm using my back button. And so now I added the title and the valuation date. So in these cases, I didn't have a valuation date for any of this stuff. So there's nothing there, but you can see that the columns are there. And then it's called division of marital property. You might not like that either. So again, I go to my report options and I say, trial exhibit, whatever. And then I go back. That should have changed the name. What happened? And it changed it to that. So amended, second, date, etc. This is creating a PDF. So if things were unallocated, then I would have to go back to my division of property and then allocate them. So remember, I'm just going to come through really quick and type in stuff because there's like zero allocation. 4%, 5%, whatever. Okay, so everything's done. So then I go to division of marital property, and this is my report. This does not export to Excel. It does, but it really doesn't. So we do have a new Excel button because some of the reports are pretty handy. We're really intending that you turn this into a PDF. So you can do it into an Excel. So just kind of take a look. If you do it into Excel, it does not move the formulas. It does not move the formulas. It just brings in all of this information that you have. So if you make changes to the Excel, it's not going to update. That's all it's going to do. So I could do PDF or I could do that, but I cannot make it into a modifiable Excel. And so then those were my options. Let me go back here. So again, that was that. And then that, that got a little crazy. So that's what's going on here. So again, it does have its limitations because obviously when you give this to your fact finder, it's just a report. You would have to modify it and then reprint it. Your judges cannot modify this, obviously. If your judge is using family law software, you can actually send them this file and they could modify them. But as far as that goes, that's kind of like the main limitation between using this versus Excel. And then there was a tax question. So as we know, we are in a net income state. And so we have to factor in, we're going to divide things properly. We might want to factor in the after tax basis. So this is the exact same ED worksheet that you saw before. Everything is in the exact same order. Everything is divided everything is divided exactly the same. So the way that I did my original ED worksheet, everything is identical. And so what this does is, though, it tax affects things. It's speculative. This tool is exactly what CPAs and financial advisors use our program for. This is one of the tools that they absolutely love. They spend a ton of time on it. Attorneys, I feel like, underutilize it, but at the same time, I understand because you're not tax advisors. So what does this mean? These are all of our assumptions. So this is our big CYA. We're going to tax affect this stuff, but it's speculative in the sense that we are assuming that Taylor, that's going to be her tax bracket when these things are sold. So that assumes that she's not going to get an amazing job and be in a different bracket. And the same thing with this client. So again, we're assuming that the assets are going to be sold close in time. And so you can modify these. I don't suggest you do, but you could. And so what you'll see is, so here, these assets here, these investment accounts, we divided them 50-50. But you can see that Taylor, so remember this is Taylor's column. Taylor's on the left, Blake's on the right. Taylor gets more money after it's divided. And so this is exactly that. So sometimes you're just sitting there and you're like, well, your client's like, that's not fair. If we split that 50-50, I'm going to pay more taxes in it. And you are right. Your client is right. That's what Taylor's take home is going to be. And that's what the husband's take home is going to be if they split it 50-50. So there's about $200 here that you would have to make up for somewhere else, assuming that you're going to after tax basis. And then the same thing here. So you can see this one's 50-50. So you would, on your ED worksheet, it's 50-50 and they're each taking half of the pot. But when you look at the after tax effect, that is obviously not what is happening. And so that's why this report is super important. I 100% suggest that you come here and play around with it. Again, it's because you built a proper financial affidavit, you put the asset in correctly, and then you know that it's going to have a tax impact. And so that's when you come to this screen and then you get pretty far on that. Let me go back here. So this thing went a little crazy. Oh, that definitely is part of it. I'm going to leave that for now. Okay, so the other thing that you can do is ED worksheet. You can do all of this has scenarios. So if you remember before, we were doing all of these side-by-side scenarios. You can do that again with your equitable distribution. It gets a little messy on the eyes when you have a lot of stuff, but we have property division scenarios. So this is side-by-side. So let me just delete this so that we know what we're doing. Okay, perfect. This matches identical what you just did on the ED worksheet. Excuse me, water break. Everything is the same. So we didn't get them exactly to 50-50, but maybe when you come here, you're like, we got to 50-50, like if that's what you wanted to do. And then obviously what happens? They're arguing over something. And what are they usually arguing over? Valuation. And so when I add a scenario, what we can do is, and we're just going to stick with the first property so that we can stay up here. Your client says it's worth $350 and he says it's worth, I don't know, $420. And so by this column, everything is staying the same in all of your reports. This is your play scenario. And so if we change the value of the property, we actually got to a closer 50-50 split. Your client might be okay with that, live with it, and just accept that as the value. Or you can explore it further. And if that's the value of the property, then you got to give me something else. Or if it's worth whatever, then you have to do, this is all about you take this, I take that. And so on a side-by-side basis, you're going to have all of your assets and debts. And so the ones obviously that are going to trip you up is going to be real estate, maybe the valuation of a business. So did I have a business in here? I did. So if you have a business, it comes a little further down. So whatever it is that they're coming back and forth on, that's where you're able to see how it affects the actual division of marital property. And the other thing that we did not touch on, because all of this was built off of, okay, here. So we're still here. All of this is about equitable distribution. More. This is what I'm talking about now here. So if you click negotiate, before you even start with all of this, you can click more and click property evaluations. And again, this is all of the property listed in the exact same order. It's just easy to add or modify here. And these are all of the values that you've agreed to use, but you can keep track of, well, my client said it was worth 320. Get an extra zero. And then he says it's worth 400, 1, 2, 3. And then they kind of split the baby here. So these values, the values to use are the ones that are going to flow through to the ED worksheet. But this is a really great place to keep track of it. And then the date that your client stated that is going to be the date that they got that appraisal or whatever date they're using for valuation. And so if you come to this screen, so again, reports, more, and you come here, you can just add another piece of property. So rather than going to assets and debts, like you can come here, added property, and then put in 50, 1, 2, 3 for like a parcel, whatever it is. You can add or change things here. Trying to check the chat. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's that. So we've got just a scotch of time left. So if you have any questions, obviously message me, email me. My email is in the chat. And then we're going to go over one last tool. And so it is arrears. This is an independent calculator. Independent meaning nothing flows through here. You're starting from scratch. And so I'm going to just focus here. So before you come in here and start typing a bunch of information, I just suggest do it little by little so you get the hang of it. What does this mean? Obligation number 1. So I could say this is child support for 2016. Start date. When did that support start? It started 1/1/2016. Easy. When did it end? I'm going to guess it ended in 2017. Whatever your dates are, it doesn't matter. So you want to have a start date and an end date, minimum. What are we doing? Child support or alimony? Doesn't matter. Start date, end date. Amount to be paid. How much child support was ordered? So they saw the judge in 2016. How much support was ordered? I'll say $350. Interest. So for interest in Florida, it's, what does it change? Like 4 times a year? You want to pull up that PDF that shows like what the interest was and when it changed. That's the only annoying thing. So you got to like match up your dates and then figure out what your interest was at that time period. And that's kind of all you need. You can do way more, but just with this basic information, I'm going to click report. And then this is my report here. So that child support number times 12 is the principal. And this is the interest. And this is the total amount owed. Okay. And then here, that was the obligation for the 2016 child support. So I say start slow on these because sometimes you forget to add the end date or the start date or the interest. And then you come here and you're like, oh, like what's going on? So as long as you train yourself to kind of make sure that you're putting in that minimum obligation, it's really great. And so here, end note interest, the rates. You can change rates here. You can add payments here. So you can do like a start date and a payment or a lump sum. So like whatever credits you want to give them, you can do those as well. And then when you come to reports, you'll see this number go down accordingly. So this is a really great report. And then it's great because you can include alimony, child support, and then add obligations for 2017, 2018, et cetera. And then you're just constantly building this. And so that's going to be under negotiate and then arrears. All right. So I think that's all I have for you. Let me go over my notes really quick. Yep, that's all I got for you. So that is the negotiate tool. I encourage you guys to come in here at a minimum, try side-by-side child support, easy peasy. At a minimum, go look at your alimony break even and a budget. Have your client write down what they need on a monthly basis, times that by 12 and put that in here. And then for equitable distribution, come and check it out just so that you can see what the property, what it looks like. So I'm not saying you have to use it, but just come here and check it and be like, oh, isn't that nifty? Never will I forget an asset. Never will I forget to update a value on my financial affidavit. It's always there.